Free agency is due to start on Monday. I know Wednesday is technically when the new league year begins, but free agency as a practical matter starts on Monday. That's when, right at 12 o'clock Eastern, we will start hearing about offers that have been made to players, tentative agreements that can't become final until 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That's when it all starts. And that's just 4 days away. And think of how much the world has changed in the last 4 days. 4 days from now, what will our national mood be? What will people be doing as they adjust to a dramatically altered routine for most people, where schools are closed, where people aren't at work, where people are either working at home or not working at all, and people are worrying about where they're going to get their money, where the average football fan's life has been thrown into disarray. Compare that to constant reports of football players agreeing to terms on multi-million dollar contracts. Awkward optics? I think so. The league doesn't. Adam Schefter of ESPN says the league has no plans to delay the start of the league year, which means free agency starts next week. Offers start Monday, signings start Wednesday. Now, you're not going to have any visits. In most cases, the big money deals are done before there's a visit anyway. Remember what happened with Brock Osweiler in Houston? They agreed to terms. He went and signed the deal, and in time they realized both sides hated each other. That will happen now. And to the extent that Tom Brady was thinking about taking visits, is he really going to do that? Now, some people may slip into wherever it is that he's living now in the offseason and visit him, but these things are all going to proceed unless the NFL changes its plans. The key words in that phrase, no plans to delay the start of the league year. Last week, when the NFLPA set up a CBA voting process that continued beyond the window for applying the franchise tag or the transition tag, the NFL told me they had no plans to move that deadline. Well, and they eventually did. So no plans means plans can change. Right now, no plans. I think they want to get through this period of time where they're figuring out what to do about the league meetings. Newsflash, they're not going to happen. And then what they're going to do about the draft. But ultimately, look, they've got full flexibility to do whatever they want with the start of free agency. And I point to 2011, the lockout. A labor dispute, a garden variety labor dispute. The players are locked out. Happens all the time in a union setting. So free agency doesn't happen until there's a new CBA. There's a new CBA signed early August, and free agency happens then, months after the draft, months after it was supposed to happen. If the NFL can delay free agency for months as part of a fairly ordinary work stoppage, why can't it delay the start of free agency in the midst of extremely extraordinary times? And I'm hoping that this is just part of that working the reality through people's brains. You know, I think eventually, for example, March Madness is going to be canceled. Whether you want it or not, whether you agree with it or not, whatever the case may be, it's going to be canceled. Once the NBA pulled the plug, March Madness was done. And we're seeing these conferences gradually come to grips with the fact that they can't have a tournament. And the Big East actually started playing games. And at halftime, somebody came to their senses and said, we can't do this. So I think as the NFL gets closer and closer to Monday, there's going to be an adult in the room that says, we can't proceed with free agency. And I've seen the cynical view on Twitter that, there's no other sports this week. We're going to dominate. First of all, I'm not sure people are going to care. And second of all, as optics go, this one, folks, is right up there with Pete Rozelle deciding to play games just a couple of days after Kennedy was shot. And I know there's a difference between games and non-game transactions, but free agency has become one of the major off-season attractions for the National Football League. So to have that all play out at a time when average people are trying to understand how their lives are going to be impacted, not just by the fear of coronavirus infecting their families and maybe killing their elderly and infirm, but also their jobs drying up, their savings being wiped out. How many times do we hear that the average American is just 1 or 2 paychecks away from having nothing? That's going to be tested for millions of families. Should we really be engaging in this spending free-for-all, this prime example of American excess at a time when average men and women aren't really sure how their lives are going to be a couple of months from now? That's my take on it. You may agree, you may disagree. but I think the smart move for the NFL is to delay the start of free agency. The smart move for the NFL is to be flexible here and to be open and transparent. I understand they're trying to figure out what they do before they tell us what they're going to do, but how many times are they going to say that they're closely monitoring the situation before they give us something substantive? And the time for being ahead of the curve is past. The NFL is playing catch-up now, and I understand their sport isn't in season. But even when it's the offseason, it's still NFL season. I mean, you can't act like you are the dominant 12-month-a-year sport, which they are, and then put their head in the ground under the guise of, well, we're not playing games now. Well, no, but you still have events that people care about. League meetings, free agency, draft. What are you going to do? People want to know. And also, it's an opportunity, to the extent there's anyone out there that isn't taking this seriously. If they're an ardent NFL fan and they see NFL postponing the draft or moving the draft indoors or otherwise taking dramatic action in the face of the coronavirus, maybe somebody who would be inclined to say it's just the flu will start to look around and realize it's more than just the flu. It's about limiting the spread so it doesn't kill people, and it's about limiting the spread so our healthcare facilities aren't overrun by sick people who need treatment. So if you have a heart attack, if you are in a car accident, if you need an appendectomy, if you are about to give birth or your spouse is about to give birth, there will be appropriate accommodations at the hospital because they won't be constantly dealing with a flood of people who are trying to get urgent care so that they don't die from the coronavirus. It's that simple. So my point continues to be this. The NFL needs to show leadership, and I think the NFL needs to be thinking long-term, big picture, what's right, what's wrong. I personally believe it's right to delay the start of free agency. It's right, if necessary, to delay the draft. They've got a lot of time to work with, and they were willing to create a major inconvenience for all teams 9 years ago in the guise of winning a labor dispute by having the draft in April and free agency later. If you're willing to take extraordinary steps in a fairly ordinary labor dispute, you should be willing to take extraordinary steps when we have found ourselves in extraordinary times. Or, more accurately, the extraordinary times have found us.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.